Hello and welcome to your United States Senate video. Let's get to it. The United States Senate is part of the United States Congress, which means their main job is making laws. If you would like to be, let's backtrack a little bit. If you would like to be a member of the United States Senate, you must be at least 30 years old. You must be a citizen of the United States for at least 9 years, and you also have to be a resident of the state that you represent. Every 2 years, our senators who serve 6-year terms, by the way, senators serve 6-year terms, every 2 years when we have a new congressional election, only 1/3 of the Senate is up for re-election. Okay, so because only 1/3 of the Senate is up for re-election at a time, that means that there's always going to be someone in the Senate that's been there before. Okay, which creates a continuous body. So whenever senators are elected or re-elected, they are placed into one of 3 classes, and they're very creatively named. Class 1, Class 2, and Class 3. Good. So people who are in Class 1, they're up for re-election in 2018. So the next time we have a congressional election, people like Ted Cruz, Claire McCaskill, they're going to be up for re-election. Okay. People in Class 2 are up for re-election in 2020, and people in Class 3 are the people that just got elected, and they're up for re-election in 2022. And we'll look at that website in class. Function and rules in the United States Senate. The function, obviously, is to make laws, but the rules are much more lax. The procedures are much more informal in the Senate than they are in the House, and that's for a few different reasons, namely because there's only 100 people in the Senate. So you don't have as much of a potential for chaos as you do in the House of Representatives. Also, the Senate is supposed to be more of a prestigious body, so they can get away with that kind of stuff. So leadership, the United States Senate is led by the Vice President of the United States, and that is currently Mike Pence. He's a Republican. His main job is to preside over the Senate. Now, typically, the Vice President isn't really involved in a lot of the Senate affairs, so the only thing he can really do, according to the Constitution, is to vote in the case of a tie. That's it. Okay? So for that reason, the President pro tempore, who is the most senior member, or the person that's been there the longest, of the majority party, is most of the time in charge of Senate procedures. Okay? So the current President pro tempore is Orrin Hatch. He's a Republican because the Republicans are in control not only of the House of Representatives, but also of the Senate. Okay, we have the minority floor leader, and that person is Chuck Schumer. If you can think back to President Trump's inauguration, Chuck Schumer he gave a speech prior to President Trump's speech. Okay, so he's a Democrat. We also have the minority whip, and that person is Richard Durbin. He's a Democrat, and he is from Illinois. Fun fact. So the minority floor leader is responsible for moving his party's bills through the Senate. The minority whip serves the same role in the Senate as they do in the House of Representatives, just trying to encourage members of their party and make sure that they turn out to vote when it's important. Okay. You've also got the majority floor leader, which is Mitch McConnell. He is a Republican. And then you've got the majority whip, and that is John Cornyn. He is also a Republican. Now, it's important to also note that sometimes the minority whip and the majority whip are called assistant minority floor leaders or assistant majority floor leaders, but we're just going to go with the term whip because it's awesome. All right, so the Senate. In the lawmaking process, the Senate is often considered to be the spot or the part of Congress that's supposed to cool the legislation. Okay, so if a bill has been presented to the Senate from the House of Representatives, the Senate is supposed to deliberate and discuss and really make sure that that bill is really worth becoming a law. Okay, so the lawmaking process in the Senate, you've got the introduction of the bill. Any senator can introduce a bill. There is no hopper in the Senate. The Senate leadership, of course, is going to control the flow of bills. So if you are a member of the majority party in the Senate, you're probably going to get your bills pushed through a little easier than if you were in the minority party. In the Senate, there are only 2 houses. We have the calendar of general orders, which is where every bill that the Senate hears is placed. And then we also have the calendar of the executive calendar, which includes treaties and nominations. So anytime that a treaty needs to be approved by the Senate. It's placed on this calendar. The nomination process, right now President Trump is in the process of trying to get his cabinet built, and before they can serve as members of his cabinet, those nominations have to be approved by the Senate. And then step 3 is discussion and debate. And this is where it can get a little interesting in the Senate. The Senate has the option of a filibuster, okay? And this term filibuster, it's just a stalling technique or a stalling tactic to prevent a vote, okay? So if you're in the minority party and you know that this bill is probably going to pass, but you really don't want it to pass, and you are going to do anything you can to try to prevent that vote from passing, you may filibuster, okay? Now, historically, filibusters are, sometimes it's like a one-man show, and the person who is leading the filibuster talks as long as they can, okay? Now, according to Senate procedures, you can't sit down, you can't go to the bathroom, you can't eat, you can't do anything, because if you stop talking, then you yield the floor, okay? And we'll talk about that more in class. Fun fact, though, the person with the record for the longest filibuster is a guy named Strom Thurmond, S-T-R-O-M, Thurmond. His filibuster lasted for 24 hours and 18 minutes. That's right, an entire day plus 18 minutes. Wow. So how do we end a filibuster? By voting for cloture, okay? And I will pause it there. And if you guys have any questions, please let me know.